You are lying still in the small riverside hut, and the darkness is so complete that you cannot see the rafters above you. The air inside the single room is cool and damp, carrying the smell of old wood smoke, damp wool, and the river itself. Outside, beyond the thin wattle and daub walls, the river makes a sound that is not quite a sigh and not quite a murmur, more like a long, slow breath drawn over mud and stone. You are wrapped in a heavy wool blanket, its weight pressing gently against your chest and legs, and you can feel the coarse fibers against your chin. The thatch above your head creaks now and then, a faint settling sound, as if the roof is also still half asleep. The pre-dawn world holds a quietness that belongs only to the deep countryside, a silence so thick it seems to have its own texture, soft and absorbent, folding around every small noise and making it gentle. There is no rush in this darkness, no urgency tugging at your sleeve. There is only the gradual awareness, rising like the mist itself, that the ferry will need you soon. You let your mind rest on the simple facts of the coming day, the mist, the water, the pole, the boat, allowing these images to drift through your thoughts like leaves on a slow current. Nothing sharp or hurried disturbs the calm surface of your half-waking mind. The moment of full waking comes not with a jolt, but with a subtle shift, the thought that it is time to move settling into your body like a stone sinking through still water. You draw a deeper breath and begin to stir beneath the blanket, moving slowly, as if your limbs are filled with warm sand. The bed beneath you is a simple wooden frame strung with rope and padded with a straw mattress that rustles softly when you shift your weight. You push the blanket aside and the cool air touches your arms and face immediately, raising goosebumps though you do not hurry to cover them. Sitting up on the edge of the bed, you let your bare feet find the packed earth floor, its surface smooth and cold from the night. You sit there for a little while, hands resting on your knees, listening to the dark and the river and the absence of birdsong. The hut is small, just the one room with its low ceiling and lime-washed walls that seem to glow very faintly, though there is no light yet to make them. The hearth is a dark hollow in the center of the far wall, and you can feel the last ghost of warmth radiating from the banked embers under the ash, a warmth that barely reaches your face, but reminds you of the fire that burned there last evening. You rise to your feet with the slow, careful motion of someone who has done this thousands of times and feels no need to rush. The floor is uneven, worn smooth in parts from bed to hearth to door, and your feet know exactly where to step. You cross to the hearth, crouch down, and take the small iron poker from its hook. With a gentle scraping, you pull aside the ash, exposing the embers that still glow a deep orange red at the center, like a tiny heart beating under the grey. You add a handful of dry straw from the basket beside the hearth, watching it catch, the flame blooming small and hesitant at first, before strengthening into a yellow flicker that pushes shadows up the walls. You feed the fire a few thin twigs, then a split log, each addition made with the same patient care a baker might use when feeding a dough. The light grows, steady and warm, filling the room with a soft glow that reveals the simple furnishings, the bed, a stool, a small table, the water bucket by the door, the pole hook mounted on the wall with your ferry pole resting across it. A single tallow candle sits in a clay holder on the table, and you light its wick from a burning twig, the flame drawing up into a small pear shape of light that smells faintly of fat and smoke. You set the candle on the window sill where its light will be visible from the path if anyone comes looking for the ferry, though at this hour no one will. Now you dress for the morning, pulling on the clothes that are laid over the stool, a thick woolen tunic that falls to your knees, its fibers smelling of lanolin and wood smoke, and a pair of loose breeches. You wrap your feet first in linen strips, then in wool, and finally pull on your leather boots, their soles worn thin but still sturdy, the leather soft and dark with years of use. You fasten a simple belt around your waist and hang your pouch from it, the pouch containing a piece of hard bread and a small lump of cheese for later. A hooded cloak of coarse wool comes last, its deep hood meant to keep the mist from your neck and ears. Every movement is slow and practiced, each tie and tuck made without thought, as if your hands remember what your mind does not need to. There is a kind of peace in this repetition, a comfort in the familiarity of cloth and leather, the way the tunic settles on your shoulders, just so, the way the belt finds the same worn notch it always does. You are still half inside a dream, the boundary between sleep and waking as thin as the mist that waits outside, and you move through these actions with the gentle drift of someone in no hurry to leave the dream entirely. When you are dressed, you take the candle from the windowsill and go to the door. The door is a heavy plank of oak, hung on leather hinges that groan only a little when you lift the latch. You step outside and the cold air meets you fully, clean and damp and alive with the smell of wet earth, crushed grass, and the green scent of the river. The candle flame dances in the sudden draught, and you shield it with your cupped hand until it steadies. Above you, the sky is still mostly dark, but a change has begun. The stars that were so sharp in the night have started to fade, growing soft and blurred at the edges, as if they are slowly dissolving into the grey. Away to the east, behind the low line of the hills, there is a faint charcoal light resting on the horizon. Not yet a colour, just a slight thinning of the blackness, a hint that the sun is on its way from far below the edge of the world. The hills themselves are dark shapes, solid and unmoving, with the occasional darker line of a tree or a hedge sketched across them. The river is a broad band of darker grey, laid out before you, its surface so still that it reflects nothing but the low sky, a mirror turned to lead. The mist is already beginning to rise in thin ribbons just above the water, curling and uncurling without wind, as if the river itself is breathing out the cold of the night. You stand for a while in the doorway, letting the chill air clear the last cobwebs of sleep from your head, and you feel the damp earth beneath your boots, the slight give of the packed mud that has been trodden firm over many seasons. The ground slopes gently down towards the bank, and you can see the path, a pale ribbon of packed earth that leads from your door to the water's edge and then disappears into the mist beyond. There is a wooden post at the bank where the ferry rope is tied, and you can just make out the darker shape of the flatboat resting on the shingle, its outline blurred by the fog. You listen, and the world gives you back a soft collection of sounds, the quiet gurgle of the river against the bank, the drip of dew falling from the thatch eaves behind you, the very distant call of an owl somewhere up in the woods, and the sound of your own breathing, slow and steady. You blow out the candle, for the sky now holds enough light to see by, a diffuse grey illumination that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere. The thin trail of smoke from the extinguished wick rises and mingles with the mist. You set the candle holder on the stool just inside the door and step out fully, pulling the door closed behind you, but not latching it, for there is no need. The air wraps around you like a damp cloth, cool but not unpleasant, and you feel the moisture beading on the rough wool of your hood. You walk down the gentle slope to the bank, your boots pressing into the wet grass and leaving dark footprints that will vanish as soon as you pass. The grass is long here, seeding, and it brushes against your legs with a soft whisper. The mist is thicker near the water, and as you descend you feel it close around you, dampening sound, softening edges, turning the world into a small, private place. The ferry post emerges from the gloom, its wood dark and wet, and the flatboat is just beyond it, a solid shape in the grey. You pause at the water's edge, looking out over the river that is your constant companion. The surface here near the bank is black and glassy, but further out, where the mist drifts, it becomes a pale, shifting grey. The far bank is invisible, hidden entirely by the fog, though you know it is there, a mirror of this shore with its own reeds and willows and landing place. The river is not wide, but the mist makes it feel vast, a quiet sea that separates two worlds. You take a deep breath, drawing the cold air deep into your lungs, and let it out slowly. This moment of stillness before the first crossing is always the same, and yet always feels new, a quiet threshold between night and duty, between the soft world of sleep and the gentle work of the day. You think of the tasks ahead, checking the boat, lighting the lantern, pushing off into the fog. These thoughts are not urgent. They are simply there, like the river itself, steady and unchanging. You feel a quiet contentment settling over you, a sense of being exactly where you should be, in the hour before waking, when the world is still and only the ferryman is moving. The path to the boat is worn smooth by your own feet, a shallow groove in the shingle that leads directly to the water. You walk along it now, the stones crunching softly under your boots, and you stop beside the flatboat. The boat is a simple thing, built of heavy planks, caulked with tar and hemp, flat-bottomed so it can rest easily on the shingle and take the ground without harm. Its wood is dark with moisture, beaded with tiny drops of mist that catch the dim light and glisten like 1,000 tiny pearls. The rope that secures it to the post is a thick twist of hemp, rough to the touch and stiff with water. You run your hand over the gunwale, feeling the smooth, cold wood, checking for any new cracks or splinters, but there are none. The boat is as sound as it was yesterday, as it has been for years. The pole lies inside, a long shaft of ash nearly twice your height, its surface polished by the grip of your hands over countless crossings. You pick it up and test its weight, running your palm along its length to feel for splinters, and the wood is smooth and cool, a familiar friend. The lantern hangs from a short post at the bow, its metal cage cold, its glass panes smeared with a fine film of condensation. You will light it soon, once you are ready to push off, but for now you simply stand and look at the boat, the pole, the river, the mist, all the simple tools of your simple trade. The cold is not biting, it is a gentle cold, the kind that wraps around you without sharp edges, and your cloak and tunic keep it at a comfortable distance. You tuck your hands into your sleeves and stand for a while longer, listening to the river's quiet breathing, watching the mist curl and drift. A light breeze stirs, barely enough to move the air, and the mist responds by shifting, opening a brief gap through which you can see the dark water of the main channel, then closing again as if the river is shy of being seen. The reeds on the near bank rustle softly, their stalks rubbing together with a dry, papery sound. A bird gives a tentative chirp from somewhere in the darkness of the hedge, the first call of the morning, then falls silent again, as if unsure whether the day has truly begun. You feel the earth slowly turning towards the sun, though the sun itself is still hidden below the hills. And you know that within the hour the mist will begin to thin, the sky will pale to pearl, and the first passengers will appear on the far bank or the near path. But that is still some time away. For now you are alone with the river, and the fog, and the slow steady beating of your own heart, standing in the doorway of the day, waiting for the light to come and the work to begin. You return briefly to the hut, not because you've forgotten something, but simply to stand once more in the quiet of the room before the day fully claims you. Inside, the fire has caught and is now burning with a low, steady flame, filling the space with a warmth that feels welcome after the damp outside. You stand before the hearth and hold your hands out, not because they are cold, but because the warmth is a small comfort you can carry with you onto the river. The light flickers on the lime-washed walls, casting your shadow large and soft, and you watch the flames for a while, thinking of nothing in particular, just the movement of the fire and the sound of the wood settling. Then you turn, take your ferry hook from the wall, a short iron implement used for catching ropes and clearing debris, and hang it from your belt. You're ready. You step outside again, leaving the door ajar so the warmth can escape a little and greet you when you return. The sky has lightened just a little more, the charcoal along horizon now touched with a hint of grey-blue, and the mist has risen higher, forming a soft ceiling a few feet above the water. You walk back down to the boat, your boots now familiar with the path, and you begin the quiet ritual of preparing for the first crossing, a ritual that has been performed by ferrymen on this river since long before you were born, and will continue long after, as steady and untroubled as the river itself. The river makes its long, slow breath against the mud. The mist moves in its silent drift, and you, the ferryman, move through the hour before waking with the slow, practiced grace of one who has made peace with the dark and the cold and the quiet. There is no hurry, no drama, no sharp edge to anything. There is only the gradual brightening of the world, the weight of the pole in your hand, and the simple, ancient rhythm of a life lived on the water. You breathe in the damp air and let it out, watching your breath mist and join the fog, and you feel deep in your bones that this is enough, that this is good, that this quiet hour before the sun rises is a gift given only to those who wake to receive it. The first bird sings a full, clear note from the willow on the bank, and you turn your face towards the sound, listening, waiting, as the day begins to gather itself around you. You stand for a moment at the water's edge, looking at the flatboat waiting on the shingle, and the mist drifts around your knees like a slow, cold tide. The boat rests exactly where you left it yesterday evening, drawn halfway onto the bank, with its bow pointing out towards the deeper channel. Its rope, a thick twist of hemp darkened by water and age, loops around the weathered post that has stood at this landing since before your father's time. The wood of the post, smoothed to a grey sheen by countless hands and ropes and seasons. The shingle beneath your boots is a mix of small round pebbles, coarse sand, and the occasional shell washed down from the hills, all of it damp and dark from the night's mist. You take a step closer, and the stones crunch softly, a sound that does not carry far in the fog. The boat itself is a simple, sturdy thing, built of heavy oak planks laid side by side and corked with a mixture of tar and hemp fibers, the tar still giving off a faint, sharp scent when the wood is wet. Its flat bottom allows it to rest easily on the uneven shore without tipping, and its low sides rise only a foot or so above the waterline, making it easy for passengers to step aboard. You know every inch of this boat, every knot in the wood, every patch where the tar has been renewed, every slight groove worn into the gunwale by the constant resting of the pole. You move towards the bow and crouch down to inspect the hull, running your hand slowly over the cool, damp planks. The wood is slick with moisture, beaded with tiny droplets that catch the low grey light and hold it like a dusting of silver. Your fingers trace the grain, feeling the ridges and the smooth hollows, where the oak has worn unevenly over years of gravel landings. You check the caulking next, pressing a thumb gently into the dark seam between two planks. The tar gives slightly, still pliable and watertight, with no sign of fresh cracking. There is a small scrape on the port side where a submerged branch caught the boat last week, a pale scar in the otherwise dark wood, but it is superficial, a memory rather than a wound. You remember the moment it happened, the slight jolt, the soft scraping sound, the way you leaned on the pole to push the boat clear without any alarm. The river gives and the river takes, and the boat accepts these small marks as a record of its life on the water, just as your hands carry their own calluses and scars. You rise from your crouch, your knees making a faint popping sound that is swallowed by the mist, and you move around to the stern, where the pole rests in its usual place, hooked under the rear bench. The pole is a long shaft of ash, nearly twice your height, chosen years ago from a straight sapling that grew beside the upper ford. Its bark was peeled, and the wood was sanded smooth with stones, and then polished by nothing more than the daily grip of your palms. As you lift it from the boat, you feel its familiar weight, a balanced heft that is neither too heavy nor too light, and you run your right hand along its entire length from the blunt iron tip at the bottom to the slightly tapered top. The ash is cool and silky, worn to a fine finish in two places where your hands always hold it, one at the middle and one near the top. And these warm sections feel almost warm against your skin despite the cold. You check for splinters by sliding your palm slowly up and down, a careful meditative motion, and you find nothing but smoothness. The iron tip, a simple cap fitted over the end and secured with a pin, is firmly attached, showing only the expected scratches from river stones. You set the pole back in the boat, resting it lengthwise along the center, and then you turn your attention to the lantern that hangs from the short wooden post at the bow. The lantern is a small iron cage with 4 glass panes, one of which has a faint crack running diagonally from a corner, but still holds firm. The door on one side opens with a little hook, and you unfasten it now, swinging the tiny door open and looking inside. The wick is still long enough for the day's work, a curled black stub that needs only a slight trim, which you do with a small knife from your pouch, cutting away the charred end so that a fresh length of cotton stands ready. There is oil in the reservoir, a dark pool that smells of fish and earth, and you top it up from the small clay bottle that you keep under the bow bench, pouring carefully until the oil reaches just below the fill line. You close the little door and secure the hook, Then wipe your oily fingers on the hem of your tunic. The glass panes are fogged with condensation, and you breathe on one of them before polishing it with your sleeve, clearing a small circle through which the light will shine. The metal of the cage is cold and rough with rust spots, but it is sturdy, and it has swung from this post through gales and frosts and summer fogs without ever failing. You take a moment to strike the flint and steel that you carry in your pouch, catching the spark on a bit of charcloth and blowing gently until a tiny flame appears. You touch this flame to the wick, and the lantern lights with a soft pop, the flame settling into a steady golden teardrop that pushes back the grey light in the small globe around the bow. The light reflects off the mist in a faint halo, and you can see the water near the boat now, the dark surface shimmering with the lantern's image, a twin flame trembling just below the real one. With the lantern lit and the pole ready, you turn to the rope that holds the boat to the post. It is a thick twist of 3 hemp strands, the fibres frayed at the knot, but still strong. You work the knot loose with your fingers, feeling the rough texture bite into your skin, and you coil the rope neatly on the shingle beside the post so that it will not tangle when you need to tie up again. The boat, now free, shifts slightly with the gentle lapping of the water, and you put a steadying hand on the gunwale to hold it still. You look out over the river, and the mist is still thick, but it has risen a little higher, so that you can now see a few feet of dark water all around the boat before the grey curtain closes. The current is visible as a subtle movement, a slow, muscular sliding of the water towards the sea, marked by the occasional leaf or twig drifting past. You know the river's moods the way a shepherd knows his flock, and this morning the mood is gentle, the current lazy, the water level normal for the season, with no sign of the sudden rises that come after heavy rain in the hills. You step into the shallows, the cold water seeping through the seams of your boots and chilling your feet, but you do not mind. It is a familiar sensation, part of the morning's ritual. You push the boat gently, feeling the resistance of the gravel under the flat hull, and guide it out until it floats freely, the water deepening from ankle to knee. The boat lifts slightly as it comes free of the bottom, settling into the river like a bird settling onto a nest, and you hold it steady with one hand while you climb aboard over the stern, your weight causing the boat to dip and rock in a slow, lazy motion. You take your place at the stern, the pole in your hands, and you stand for a moment with the boat drifting just a few feet from the bank. The lantern's light glows beside you, and the mist closes around the bow, so that you seem to be floating in a small, warm sphere of gold and grey. The world has shrunk again, as it always does when you are on the water in the fog, and you feel the peace of that shrinking, the way it simplifies everything to the boat, the pole, the river, and the next gentle push. You can hear the water dripping from the pole blade each time you lift it, the tiny ripples lapping against the hull with a sound like a spoon tapping a bowl, the creak of the boat's timbers as they adjust to the water's pressure. The mist muffles all these sounds so that they seem to come from very close, as if the boat is its own small world with its own small music. You let the pole sink until the iron tip touches the bottom, and you feel the riverbed through the shaft, a soft, muddy resistance that tells you the depth here is about 6 feet. You push, gently at first, and the boat glides forward, the motion smooth and silent, except for the soft gurgle of water parting around the bow. The lantern's reflection slides across the surface, a golden smear that wobbles and then steadies as you settle into the rhythm. The work of preparing the boat is never truly finished until you have made that first push, because the boat comes alive only when it is on the water, responding to your touch. You feel the familiar communion between your hands, the pole, the water, and the wood. A quiet conversation that has been going on for years without words. The mist is cool on your face, gathering in the fibers of your hood and leaving tiny droplets on your eyebrows, and you blink them away without thinking. You steer the boat away from the bank and out towards the middle of the river, using the pole not just to push, but also to steer, trailing it behind like a rudder when you need to correct the slight drift caused by the current. The fog folds around you, and soon the near bank disappears entirely, leaving only the lantern, the boat, and the dark water stretching in every direction into soft grey. There is no up or down, no east or west, only the gentle forward motion and the steady, calming repetition of the pole. Lower, push, lift, drip, lower, push, lift, drip, lower, push. The sound of the water dripping from the raised pole becomes a kind of metronome, a slow liquid tick that measures the progress of the boat across the unseen river. You think about the boat as you work, the way it was built by a craftsman from the village many years ago, a man whose name you still remember, though he is long gone. He chose the oak from a tree that grew on the high bank, felled it in winter when the sap was low, and let the planks season for 2 full years before shaping them. The nails are hand-forged iron, now blackened by water, but still holding firm. The boat has never leaked, never cracked, never failed you, and you treat it with the same quiet respect you would give an old horse or a faithful dog. You know that it will need recaulking next summer, that the port gunwale is beginning to wear thin, that the bench will need a new peg before the winter rains. These are small things, small cares that drift through your mind as you pole, and they are comforting in their ordinariness. A reminder that life is made of small, manageable tasks rather than large, alarming ones. The boat, the pole, the lantern, the rope, the river, these are your companions, and they ask nothing of you but your steady presence and your careful hands. You notice that the mist has begun to change as you move further from the shore. It is thinner here in the channel, or perhaps the dawn is finally strong enough to penetrate it, because the grey is touched now with a faint milky luminescence that makes the lantern's light seem less necessary. The sky above the fog must be lightening, and that light is filtering down through the mist like light through a thin woolen cloth. You can see the surface of the water more clearly now, the way it swirls in small eddies behind your pole, the way it dimples where a fish rises unseen. The air still smells of damp and mud, but there is also a green scent now, the smell of water weeds and wet wood and the fresh breath of the morning. You take a deeper breath, and the cold air fills your lungs, and you feel a gentle alertness spreading through your body, not sharp or sudden, but gradual, like the light itself. The rhythm of the pole is so ingrained in you that you can let your mind drift while your body continues the work, and your thoughts go back to the hut, the fire, the candle, the stillness of that first waking moment. You think of the wool blanket still warm on the bed, the embers still glowing on the hearth, and the small clay cup you will use to drink water from the bucket when you return. These images pass through your mind as softly as the mist passes over the water, leaving no trace of worry or urgency. You are not in a hurry to cross. There is no one waiting that you know of, and even if there were, the river cannot be rushed. The ferryman's time is the river's time, and the river's time is slow and steady, measured not in minutes, but in the sweep of the current and the drift of the mist and the gradual brightening of the sky. After a while you pause your poling and let the boat coast on its own momentum, the pole resting loosely in your hands with its tip trailing in the water. The boat slides forward silently, the only sound the faint hiss of water along the hull. You look out into the mist and see, for the first time on this crossing, a shape emerging ahead, the far bank, or perhaps a large tree on the near bank that you have drifted past and now re-encountered in the fog. It is hard to tell distance in the mist, but the shape is dark and solid, a low mass of reeds and the drooping branches of a willow, their tips trailing in the water. You recognize it as the landing on the far side, the same simple apron of gravel where you will tie up and wait. The sight of it brings a gentle satisfaction, the quiet pleasure of a task nearly completed, and you take up the pole again to guide the boat the last few yards. The pole touches bottom at a shallow angle, and you push with a little more force to run the boat up onto the shingle, the flat hull hissing against the gravel as it grounds. You step out into the cold water, the shock of it waking your feet fully, and you pull the boat up until it is secure, then take the rope and loop it around a stone on the bank. The mist is still thick here, but the darkness has definitely lifted, and the sky above the fog is now a pale, even grey, the colour of a dove's breast. You stand beside the boat, breathing a little harder from the exertion, and you look back the way you came, though you can see nothing but the grey curtain. The lantern still burns beside the bow, its flame steady and golden, and you leave it lit for now, a beacon for any early traveller who might be watching from the far shore. The boat is ready, the river is crossed, and the morning stretches ahead of you, quiet and unhurried, as you wait for the world to wake. You push away from the shore with a gentle thrust, the iron tip of the pole sinking into the soft silt of the riverbed, and the flatboat glides forward with a low, liquid gurgle that is the first voice of the water this morning. The motion is smooth and unhurried, a slow separation from the land that you feel as a slight lifting of the hull as the boat leaves the gravel and finds its balance on the deeper channel. The bank behind you, which was a solid darkness against the grey fog, begins to dissolve almost immediately, its reeds and willows fading from black to grey to nothing as the mist folds around them, and soon there is no land at all, only the boat and the lantern and the softly breathing river. You do not look back, there is nothing to see back there, and Ferryman's attention is always forward, into the mist, into the crossing. The pole comes free of the bottom with a soft sucking sound, and water streams from its length in silver threads that catch the lantern light for a brief moment before they fall back into the dark river. You walk your hands up the shaft and set the pole again, the ash sliding through your grip with the familiar silken smoothness, and the blade finds the bottom once more at a slightly different angle, telling you that the boat has drifted a little to the left. You correct with a subtle twist of your wrists, using the pole as a rudder for a few heartbeats, and the boat straightens its path, its bow pointing faithfully towards the far bank that you cannot yet see. The world has shrunk now to a small circle of dim visibility, the few feet of dark water round the hull, the faint halo of the lantern at the bow, and the measured sound of the pole entering and leaving the river. Everything else is a soft grey void, a quiet emptiness that wraps around you like a second cloak, and you feel the privacy of this small space as a comfort, a cocoon from which the waking day is still distant. The mist is cool on your face, settling in the fibers of your hood and beading on your eyebrows, and when you breathe out, your own breath joins the fog, a small temporary cloud that merges with the larger one. The air tastes of clean water and wet wood in the faint earthy scent of the riverbed that the pole stirs up with each push. You do not think about time, not in the way that people in towns and villages think of it. You think instead of the rhythm of the pole, the angle of the boat, the unseen current that you feel through the soles of your boots as a gentle, persistent pressure against the hull. Time on the river is measured in strokes, in the slow count of dips and lifts, and this morning the count is unhurried, the strokes long and easy, as if the river itself is still half asleep and content to carry you slowly. You can hear water dripping from the blade each time you lift it, a sound made of many small separate drips that run together into a liquid patter, and beneath that the tiny ripples lap against the wood of the hull with a sound like a spoon tapping softly against a bowl. The boat creaks now and then, a low musical sound that comes from the timbers adjusting to the water's pressure and the slight shifts of your weight. The lantern's flame trembles once, a quick flutter that sends a ripple of shadow across the gunwale, and then it steadies again, its light a steady golden teardrop that reflects off the mist in a faint, circular glow. The mist itself seems to hold a faint luminescence, as if the coming dawn is already dissolved in it, a promise of light that has not yet arrived but is on its way. The darkness on the river is not total. It is a soft, veiled darkness, grey rather than black, and it allows you to see the surface of the water near the boat, the way it moves in slow, oily swirls behind the pole, the way the occasional leaf or twig drifts past in the current, travelling on its own silent journey to the sea. You watch these small things without really watching them, your gaze soft and unfocused, and your mind drifts in the same easy way, not thinking of anything in particular, just aware of the boat and the pole and the water and the mist. The pole finds the bottom at varying depths as you cross, and through the shaft you can read the riverbed like a blind man reading a familiar text. Sometimes the iron tip touches clay, and the resistance is firm and smooth, allowing a strong, clean push that sends the boat forward with a satisfying glide. Other times it sinks into mud, and the pole must be pulled free with a slight extra effort, a soft, sucking release that leaves a smear of dark silt on the blade. Occasionally it strikes a stone, and the vibration travels up the ash shaft into your hands, a brief dull note that tells you of a rocky patch on the bottom, and you steer around it without thinking, adjusting the angle of the pole so that the next stroke finds softer ground. Once or twice the pole brushes against a submerged branch, and you feel the slight tug of waterlogged wood, a reminder of the tree that fell into the river during the winter storms and now lies on the bottom, slowly becoming part of the river's architecture. You know every bend and sandbar, every hole and shallow, and the boat follows a path worn into your memory, a line that does not require sight, only the quiet attention of your body. Your hands and feet and the small of your back all read the river together, and you navigate the crossing with the same unthinking ease with which you walk the path from your hut to the bank. The middle of the river is the deepest part, and here the pole reaches down further before touching bottom, so that your hands must slide almost to the top of the shaft. The current is stronger here, a steady, muscular flow that pushes against the side of the boat and tries to turn the bow downstream, and you compensate by poling at a slight angle, using the current's own force to carry you diagonally across rather than fighting it directly. The water makes a different sound in the deep channel, a deeper, more resonant gurgle, and the boat feels lighter, more alive, as if it is a horse that has found its stride. The mist is thinner here too, or perhaps it is only that you have become accustomed to it, because you can now see a little further, the lantern light reaching out over a slightly wider circle of water that is dark and smooth, with only a faint rippling where the current breaks over a submerged sandbar. The sky above the fog must be continuing to lighten, because the grey around you is no longer the flat, dark grey of deep night, but a softer, pearly grey that holds the faintest hint of warmth, as if the sun is just below the horizon and its light is soaking through the mist like water through a cloth. You settle into the rhythm of the crossing more deeply as the minutes pass, and the rhythm becomes a kind of meditation, a quiet repetition that stills the mind and calms the body. The motions are so familiar that they require no thought at all. Lower the pole, feel for the bottom, lean your weight into the push, feel the boat respond and glide, pull the pole free, let the water stream off, walk the hands up, lower again. Each stroke is slightly different in its details, the depth, the resistance, the angle of the push, and yet each stroke is exactly the same in its essence, a small, steady act of moving forward through the water. The sounds blend into a gentle, ongoing music, the glug of the pole entering, the brief rush of water, the drip-drip as it rises, the faint tap of wood on the gunwale when you shift your grip, the creak of the boat, the lap of ripples, the distant, muffled call of a bird somewhere in the fog. You are aware of these sounds as a single continuous presence, a soft blanket of noise that fills the world without demanding attention, and your breathing slows to match the rhythm of the pole, each exhale coming with the push, each inhale with the lift. Your thoughts drift through the quiet of your mind like the mist itself, slow and formless. You think of the fire in the hut, still burning low, and the way its warmth will feel on your face when you return. You think of the bread and cheese in your pouch, and you feel a gentle hunger that is not yet urgent, just a faint reminder that the body will need feeding eventually. You think of the villagers on both sides of the river, still sleeping in their beds, their houses dark and silent, their animals quiet in the byres. You know each family, each face, each name, and you know that soon they will wake and come to the river with their baskets and tools and errands, and you will carry them across one by one or in small groups, and they will pay you with a coin or a loaf or a jar of honey, or sometimes with nothing but a nod and a quiet word of thanks. But that is for later. Now, in this still hour before the world wakes, you are alone with the river and the fog and the simple work of the pole, and that is enough. That is more than enough. The far bank begins to take shape slowly, emerging from the mist, not as a sudden revelation, but as a gradual, subtle change in the texture of the grey. At first you feel it more than see it, a sense of something solid ahead, a closing in of the space, and then a darker mass appears within the fog, low and indistinct, the suggestion of a bank rather than the bank itself. As you pole closer, the darkness resolves into a line of reeds, their feathered heads dark against the pale grey, swaying slightly in the current. Behind the reeds, the leaning shapes of willows become visible, their long branches trailing in the water, their trunks pale and ghostly in the mist. The sound of the river changes here, becoming shallower, the soft gurgling whisper over submerged roots, and you know from the sound that you are nearing the landing. You pole a little more slowly now, giving the boat time to drift while you read the water and the bank. The lantern's light picks out the details as they emerge. The pale shingle of the landing, a large flat stone that serves as a step, the darker shape of the rope post, and the path that leads up from the water and disappears into the mist towards the far village. Everything is still and silent, as if the far bank is still holding its breath, waiting for the day to begin. You guide the boat towards the landing with the lightest of touches, a few final strokes of the pole that are more about steering than pushing, and the hull hisses softly as it touches the gravel. The boat settles with a small gentle lurch, and the sound of the gravel grinding against the wood is a familiar, grounding noise that tells you the crossing is done. You step out into the cold water, feeling it seep into your boots, and you take the rope and loop it around the post with a few quick turns, the rough hemp catching on itself and holding firm. The boat is secure, the far bank is reached, and you stand for a moment with your hands resting on the post, looking back into the mist towards the river. The fog still hides the near bank completely, and the water stretches away into grey silence. But you know that the morning is progressing, that the mist will soon begin to lift, and that the quiet hour before dawn is nearly spent. You turn and look at the path leading up to the village, and you listen. But there are no footsteps yet, no voices, only the drip of water from the willow leaves and the distant, tentative call of a waking bird. You settle onto the flat stone at the edge of the landing, pulling your hood closer, and you wait, as you have waited 1,000 times before, for the world to wake up around you. You have been poling for some time now, and the near bank has long since vanished into the fog behind you, and the far bank is not yet visible ahead, and the river has become a wide, soft emptiness where the only solid things are the boat, the pole in your hands, and the small globe of lantern light that travels with you like a faithful companion. The mist has thickened in this middle reach, rising from the water and closing around you in slow, drifting layers that fold and unfold without wind, so that the lantern no longer illuminates a circle of water, but seems to float in a soft grey void, its light suspended and diffuse, a golden smear that barely reaches the surface below. You feel as though you have poled into a different world, a quiet space between the two banks where the usual markers of distance and direction have dissolved, leaving only the steady rhythm of your work and the gentle creak of the boat's timbers. The air is so saturated with moisture that your tunic grows heavy on your shoulders, and the wool of your hood clings damply to your hair, and when you draw a breath, the air itself seems thick, almost drinkable, like breathing cool steam. You do not mind this. It is a familiar sensation, part of every river crossing in the early morning, and it brings with it a kind of hush that settles deep into your bones. The pole finds the bottom at a considerable depth here, so that you must let your hand slide nearly to the top of the shaft before the iron tip touches the riverbed. The bottom is soft mud, judging by the way the pole sinks in without resistance, and then pulls free with a low, reluctant sucking sound that travels up the wood into your palms. Each push is a slow, deliberate motion. You lower the pole, feel it slide through your grip until the blade meets the mud, then lean your weight into it, the boat responding with a gentle surge forward that ruffles the dark water at the bow. You pull the pole free, a cascade of droplets falling from its length in a fine silver rain, and you walk your hands up the shaft, one over the other, in a rhythm so practiced that your fingers find their places without guidance. The ash is cool and slick with water, and yet the worn patches where your palms rest feel almost warm, polished to a smoothness that is silken to the touch. You have held this pole through every crossing for years, and it knows the shape of your hands, as well as your hands know its weight and balance. There is a quiet conversation happening between you and the pole and the river, a wordless exchange of pressure and resistance, and you listen to it with your whole body, sensing the current, the depth, the slight variations in the bottom, and you adjust your stroke without breaking the rhythm, as easily as a bird adjusts its wing to a shift in the wind. The mist presses close on all sides, and it is no longer a mere grey curtain, but a dense, living presence that muffles every sound and blurs every outline. The boat's bow is only a few feet in front of you, yet you can barely see it. The lantern post is a dark smudge, the lantern itself a soft bloom of gold that seems to float in mid-air, unattached to any surface. The light catches the moisture in the air and makes it shimmer, a faint, dusty glitter that surrounds you like a halo. When you look down, the water is a dark, moving mirror that reflects nothing but the lantern's glow, a wavering oval of light that slides along beside the hull. The ripples from the bow spread out in slow, oil-smooth circles and disappear almost immediately into the grey. Even the sound of the water against the boat seems distant, softened by the fog into a gentle, continuous murmur that is more a feeling than a noise, a low vibration that travels through the wood and into the soles of your boots. The world beyond the boat has ceased to exist, and you are suspended in a quiet nowhere, with no up or down, no before or after, only the slow, steady progress of the crossing. You steer not by landmarks, but by the subtle pull of the deeper channel, the way the water darkens and moves with a slower, more muscular current beneath the surface calm. You feel it through the pole, that slight increase in pressure when you trail the blade as a rudder, the way the boat wants to turn downstream if you do not hold it steady. The current is like a broad, invisible hand pressing against the hull, and you lean against it with small corrections, using the pole to angle the bow slightly upstream so that your drift carries you in a diagonal line towards the far landing rather than straight across. It is a skill you learned so long ago that you cannot remember learning it. Your body simply knows, the way a body knows how to balance on 2 feet or how to blink in bright light. You let your mind rest on the simple facts of the current and the depths, allowing your thoughts to settle into a slow, easy drift that matches the drift of the boat. There is no hurry, no destination that must be reached by a certain time. The river does not rush, and neither do you. The mist creates its own strange acoustics, amplifying some sounds and muting others, so that the drip of water from the pole seems to fall very close to your ear, each droplet a distinct musical note, while the distant call of a heron, if there is one, would be swallowed entirely before it reached you. You can hear your own breathing, slow and steady, and the occasional soft rustle of your cloak as you shift your weight, and the creak of the boat's planks as they flex with the water's movement. There is a deep silence here at the center of the river, a silence so profound that it seems to have a texture, a soft, absorbent quality that wraps around every small sound and holds it gently. Even your own thoughts become slow and gentle in this silence. You think of nothing sharp or urgent, only images that drift through your mind like the mist itself, the reeds on the bank, the texture of the rope, the way the morning light will look when it finally breaks through, the taste of the bread you will eat later. these thoughts come and go without leaving any mark, and you watch them pass with the same detached calm with which you watch the water flowing past the hull. After a while, you pause your poling and let the boat coast on its own momentum, the pole resting loosely in your hands with its tip trailing in the water behind you. The boat slides forward silently, the only sound a faint hiss along the sides, and you stand in the stillness, feeling the gentle rock of the current beneath your feet. The lantern flame trembles once and then steadies, its light dancing across the mist in slow, wavering patterns. You look out into the grey and see nothing but grey, a soft, featureless void that seems to stretch on forever, and yet you feel no unease, because you know this void is not empty. It is full of the river and the morning and the quiet presence of the world waiting to wake. The mist holds the boat like a cupped hand, and you are content to drift for a while, letting the current carry you just a little downstream before you take up the pole again. The silence is not lonely. It is peaceful, a companionable silence that asks nothing of you, that does not need to be filled with words or action. You might close your eyes for a moment, just to feel the difference, and when you do, the darkness behind your lids is warm and red-tinged from the lantern, and the boat's motion becomes more pronounced, a slow, liquid sway that is almost like being rocked. You open your eyes again, and the grey returns, unchanged, patient. The mist has a scent, you notice, a clean, cold scent of wet stone and water weeds, and the faint, peaty smell of the hills from which the river flows. It is a scent that speaks of deep time, of the long journey the water has made from springs and bogs and high mountain tarns, gathering the taste of the earth as it comes. You breathe it in, and it fills your lungs with a freshness that is both calming and gently invigorating, waking you fully without any sharpness. The droplets that have gathered on your hood and sleeves begin to trickle down, and you feel a cold line run along your neck, where a bead of water finds its way inside your collar. But you do not flinch. You simply wipe it away with a slow, lazy hand. The cold is a part of the morning, as much a part as the mist and the river and the boat, and you accept it without complaint, as you accept everything the river gives you. You become aware, after a time, that the mist is changing, not thinning exactly, but taking on a different quality, a subtle shift in the light that means the sun is climbing behind the clouds and the fog. The grey is no longer the flat, dense grey of pre-dawn, but a softer, more luminous grey, a grey that holds a hidden warmth, a promise of gold. The lantern's light, which was once a necessary beacon, now seems slightly redundant, its flame a little paler against the brightening air, and you know that soon you will be able to blow it out and let the natural light take over. The boat continues to drift, and you feel a gentle sense of anticipation, not for any event, but simply for the gradual unveiling of the world. The mist will lift, the banks will appear, the birds will begin their full chorus, and the first travellers will come down to the water's edge, and your quiet hour of solitude will give way to the simple, pleasant work of the day. But that is still ahead, and for now you are content to remain in this slow, suspended moment, where the river is a dark ribbon, the mist a soft blanket, and the pole a steady companion in your hands. Eventually you take up the rhythm again, because the current has nudged the boat slightly off course, and you need to correct. The pole sinks into the mud, and you push, feeling the boat respond with its familiar surge. The mist swirls around the bow as you move, parting lazily and closing again behind you, as if the river is reluctant to reveal its secrets. You can just make out the faintest suggestion of something ahead, a darker patch within the grey that might be the far bank or might be nothing, a trick of the fog. You pull towards it anyway, not because you are certain, but because the river will lead you there, as it always does. The strokes are slow and measured, and the sounds of the pole and the water and the boat blend into a soft, continuous music that carries you forward through the void. A music that has played on this river since long before you were born and will play long after, as steady and untroubled as the mist itself. You are simply a part of it now, a small quiet figure in a small quiet boat moving through the deep mist on a river that knows no hurry, and the peace of it fills you completely, from the crown of your head to the soles of your wet boots. The act of ferrying is, at its quiet heart, a series of small patient motions that repeat again and again without variation, and yet each one carries its own subtle signature, a slight difference in the feel of the riverbed, or the angle of the current, or the weight of your own body as you lean into the push. You stand at the stern of the flatboat, the pole held loosely but securely in both hands, and you let the rhythm take you as it always does, your mind settling into a calm, open state where the boundary between yourself and the boat and the water becomes thin and unimportant. The pole is a long shaft of ash, cool and smooth, its surface worn to a soft sheen by years of daily use, and it feels almost alive in your grip, responsive to the slightest shift of your wrists or the pressure of your palms. The iron tip at its lower end is dark with rust and river water, shaped into a blunt, rounded blade that bites gently into the silt and gravel of the bottom without sinking too deep, and the upper end is tapered to a comfortable thickness that fits the hollow of your hand when you need to choke up for a shorter stroke. You begin each cycle by lifting the pole clear of the water, letting the river stream off its length in a cascade of droplets that catch the lantern light and glitter for an instant before falling back into the dark surface. And then you let the pole slide downward through your grip until the iron tip touches the bottom. The contact travels up the shaft as a soft, dull thud that you feel in your palms, and you read the riverbed through that sensation. A firm, smooth resistance means clay or packed sand, a soft and giving sensation means deep silt, a sudden jolt means a stone or a buried branch. This reading happens without thought, your hands interpreting the language of the river as easily as you interpret the sound of the water against the hull. Once the pole is set, you lean your weight into it, not with a sudden heave, but with a slow, steady pressure that begins in your shoulders and travels down through your back and hips and legs until the boat responds, surging forward with a gentle liquid glide that ruffles the dark water at the bow. You feel the boat's motion through the soles of your boots, a slight lift and slide, and you hear the soft gurgle of water parting around the hull, a sound that is both continuous and always changing, like a low, murmured conversation between the wood and the river. When the push is complete and the boat has moved forward a few yards, you pull the pole free, and the river releases it with a soft, sucking sigh that is one of the most familiar sounds of your life. The pole comes up easily, dripping a fine silver rain, and you walk your hands up the shaft one over the other until you are holding it near the top again, ready for the next stroke. The motion is so practiced that your fingers find their places without any conscious direction. The worn patches where your palms have polished the wood feel almost warm against your skin, even in the cold, damp air. Sometimes you shift your grip slightly, choking up when the water is shallower or letting the pole slide deeper when the channel drops away beneath you. and these adjustments are made with the same unthinking ease with which you adjust your balance when standing on uneven ground. The rhythm of the pole becomes a kind of breathing: push, glide, pull, lift, lower, push, glide, pull, lift, lower, and your own breath falls into the same pattern, so that you exhale with each push and inhale as the pole rises. There is a quiet harmony in this, a union of body and boat and river that feels as natural as sleep. The sounds of the work create their own soft music, a music that has no melody but a deep, calming rhythm. The pole entering the water makes a low, hollow blug that varies slightly depending on the depth and the speed of the stroke, and when you pull it free, the river gives a wet, sucking pop, followed by the rapid, liquid patter of falling drops. The boat itself adds its own notes: the faint creak of the timbers as they flex, the gentle tap of the pole against the gunwale when you shift your grip, the steady hiss of water along the hull, and the occasional soft knock of a piece of driftwood bumping against the side. Above these sounds, or rather woven through them, is the larger silence of the misty river, a silence so deep and absorbent that it seems to amplify the small noises while muffling any that are distant. Even your own movements are quiet. Your boots hardly shift on the wet planks, and the wool of your cloak makes only the softest rustle when you lean forward or back. The lantern flame burns steadily at the bow, its light reflecting off the polished shaft of the pole and glinting on the droplets that hang from the iron tip between strokes, and the whole scene, sound and sight together, is so gentle and unvarying that it lulls the mind into a peaceful, waking sleep. You can feel the river's personality through the pole, the way the current presses against the shaft when you trail it as a rudder, the way the bottom changes from stretch to stretch. In some places the riverbed is firm and gravelly, and the pole makes a crisp grating sound as it pushes off, sending the boat forward with a satisfying clean surge. In other places the bottom is soft mud, and the pole sinks in with a slow, silent pressure, requiring a slightly harder pull to free it, and the blade comes up smeared with a dark, fine silt that slides off in thick drips. There are patches of sand where the pole slides smoothly and the push feels almost effortless, the boat gliding as if on oil. And there are hidden stones that surprise you with a sudden, dull vibration up the shaft, a brief, musical note that fades as quickly as it came. Each of these variations is a small piece of information, a detail in the map of the river that you carry in your body, and you note them all without consciously noting them, your hands and arms and shoulders remembering the river's shape better than your mind ever could. The mist wraps around you as you work, cool and damp, and the moisture beads on your hood and on the exposed wood of the gunwale and on the iron of the lantern, and the air is so still that your breath hangs in front of you for a moment before dissolving into the grey. The world remains small, just the boat and the lantern, and the few feet of dark water around you, and the repetition of the pole strokes seems to hold time still, so that you have no sense of how long you have been crossing or how far you have come. This timelessness is a gift, a quiet release from the usual pressures of the day, and you accept it with a calm gratitude that needs no words. Your body works steadily, and your mind wanders through peaceful, unconnected thoughts. The pattern of the clouds on the horizon yesterday evening, the taste of the ale the innkeeper's wife gave you last week, the way the willow branches trail in the current like long green hair. These thoughts come and go without leaving any trace, and the rhythm of the pole continues beneath them, steady as a heartbeat. Occasionally you pause to rest, not because you are tired, but because the river requires a moment of stillness, and you let the pole trail in the water behind the boat, its tip dragging lightly along the bottom and acting as a brake. The boat slows and drifts, and you stand with your weight on one leg and your hands resting on the top of the pole, and you look out into the mist with soft, unfocused eyes. The lantern's light spills out over the water in a trembling circle, and you watch the way the ripples spread and fade, the way the surface dimples where a fish rises unseen, the way a single leaf drifts past on the current, its edges curled and brown. These small sights are endlessly absorbing, and you could watch them for hours without growing bored, because boredom requires a desire for something different, and you desire nothing different. You are exactly where you want to be, doing exactly what you want to be, doing exactly what you want to do, and the peace of that is complete. After a minute or an hour, you cannot tell. You take up the pole again and resume the rhythm, and the boat moves forward once more into the soft, grey unknown. The pole has its own subtle balance, a quality that you feel most clearly when you lift it free of the water and hold it vertically for a moment before the next stroke. The weight is concentrated near the iron tip, so that the shaft wants to tip downward, and you counterbalance this with a light grip near the top, letting the pole pivot in your hand like a giant, slow pendulum. This momentary pause, with the pole held upright and the water streaming down its length, is a small ceremonial gesture that marks the end of one stroke and the beginning of the next, a silent beat in the music of the crossing. You sometimes use this pause to adjust your stance, shifting your feet on the wet planks to a more comfortable position, or to wipe the moisture from your face with the back of your sleeve, or simply to take a deeper breath of the cool, clean air. Then you lower the pole, feel the bottom, lean into the push, and the cycle continues, as it has continued for thousands of strokes already this morning and will continue for thousands more before the day is done. The work is physical but not strenuous. It requires a slow, steady effort rather than bursts of strength, and your body has long since adapted to it, building a quiet endurance that allows you to pole for hours without fatigue. Your shoulders and arms feel warm from the movement, a pleasant contrast to the cool air, and your hands are strong and sure on the smooth wood. The calluses on your palms are thick and even, shaped by the pole into a pattern that matches the worn spots exactly, and they protect you from blisters and splinters while still allowing you to feel every subtle vibration from the riverbed. Your back is straight, your knees slightly bent, your stance wide and stable, and you move with an economy of motion that wastes no energy, each muscle doing only what is needed and no more. This physical ease is part of the deeper peace of the crossing, a feeling of being perfectly suited to the task, as if you and the pole and the boat and the river were all designed for each other at the beginning of the world. From time to time you hear a sound from beyond the mist, a sound that reminds you that there is a world outside the small circle of the boat, the distant bark of a dog on one of the farms, the crow of a rooster announcing the dawn to a village you cannot see, the low, mournful call of a heron somewhere upriver. These sounds come to you softened and blurred by the fog, stripped of their sharpness, and they seem as distant as memories, as if they belong to another time rather than another place. You do not feel disconnected from that world. You know it is there, waiting, and that soon you will be part of it again, ferrying farmers and merchants and travellers from one bank to the other, exchanging quiet greetings, collecting your small fares. but for now you're content to be outside it, suspended in this misty in-between, where the only task is the slow work of the pole, and the only company is the river and the lantern and the silent drifting fog. The light continues to change almost imperceptibly as the sun climbs behind the clouds, and the grey of the mist takes on a faint, milky luminescence that makes the lantern's flame seem paler and smaller. You know that soon you will reach the far bank, that the crossing will end and the next quiet task will begin, but you do not hurry towards that moment. You let the rhythm hold you, stroke after stroke, each one a small, perfect act of moving forward through the water, and you feel the deep, calm satisfaction of work done slowly and well. The pole rises and falls, the water drips and lugs, the boat creaks and glides, and you, the ferryman, are nothing more than a steady pair of hands and a quiet heart, moving through the mist on a river that has no end and no beginning, only the slow, eternal flow of the present moment. After a time that could be minutes or half an hour, the mist begins to thin on the far side of the river, and the change is so gradual that you notice it first not as a visible shift, but as a subtle alteration in the quality of the air itself, a slight loosening of the grey density that has wrapped around the boat for so long. The lantern's light, which has been reflecting off the fog in a close, tight halo, now seems to reach a little further, its golden glow penetrating the mist rather than bouncing back from it, and the water beside the hull becomes visible in a wider circle, its dark surface shimmering with the lantern's reflection and the faint silvery hint of the coming dawn. You pause in your poling for a moment, letting the boat drift, and you look ahead with soft, patient eyes, not straining to see, but simply allowing the world to reveal itself in its own slow time. The grey in front of you is no longer a flat, featureless wall. It has begun to develop texture, darker patches and lighter patches, vague vertical smudges that could be tree trunks or reed stems or nothing at all, and the air has a cooler, fresher smell, the scent of wet leaves and bank mud and the green growing things that line the water's edge. You take up the pole again and resume your gentle, rhythmic pushing, and with each stroke the details ahead become slightly more distinct, as if you are watching a scene being slowly painted on a grey canvas by an invisible hand. First the tips of the reeds emerge, their feathered heads dark against the pale grey, nodding slightly in the current like a crowd of silent, watching figures. They are tall and dense, a thick band of them that stretches along the bank as far as you can see in the thinning mist, their stems a pale straw colour where they catch the early light, their shadows deep and dark at the waterline. You steer the boat slightly to the left, aiming for the gap in the reeds that you know marks the landing, though the gap itself is still hidden, a secret held by the fog for a few moments longer. The reeds rustle faintly as you pass, a dry, papery whisper that sounds like the bank itself is breathing, and a small bird, startled from its hiding place, flits up and disappears into the grey with a rapid beat of wings that leaves a trail of ripples in the air. Behind the reeds, the bank begins to take shape, a low shelf of mud and tangled roots, and the pale, leaning trunks of willows that hang out over the water, their long branches trailing in the current like green, dripping fingers. The willows are ancient trees, their bark rough and deeply furrowed, their leaves a soft grey-green that shimmers with collected moisture, and they lean towards the river with the patient, crooked posture of old men who have spent a lifetime watching the water flow past. Their roots are exposed in places, washed bare by floods and currents, forming dark, twisted arches that disappear into the mud. And beneath these arches the bank is hollowed out into small, shadowy caves where the water gurgles and swirls with a deeper, more resonant sound. The mist clings to the willow branches, catching on the long, slender leaves and dripping from them in a slow, continuous patter, as if each tree is a small, private rainstorm. You know these willows well. You've passed them 1,000 times, in sun and rain and fog, and they are as familiar to you as the beams of your hut. Yet each time you see them emerge from the mist, there is a quiet sense of recognition, a gentle pleasure in their constancy. The sound of the river changes as you approach the far bank, becoming shallower and more musical, a soft, liquid gurgle over submerged roots, and a gentle lapping against the mud. The deep, silent current of the main channel gives way to a lighter, more playful movement, the water breaking into tiny ripples and eddies that swirl around the willow roots and form small spinning whirlpools that last only a second before smoothing out again. You can feel the change through the pole, the way the riverbed rises to meet the iron tip sooner, the way the bottom changes from deep silt to a firmer mix of sand and gravel, the way the pole encounters more stones and the occasional submerged log. You adjust your strokes accordingly, making them shorter and gentler, using the pole more for steering than for propulsion, because the current here is weaker and the boat can be guided with the lightest of touches. The hull hisses softly as it slides over a shallow patch, and you feel the slight drag of the gravel through the wood, a sensation that tells you the water is now only a few feet deep and the landing is very close. The landing itself emerges from the mist as a pale gravel slope that rises from the water's edge and disappears into the bank vegetation. It is a simple apron of packed stones and coarse sand, kept clear of reeds and brush by the constant coming and going of the ferry and the travellers who use it. The gravel is a mix of greys and browns and the occasional white of a broken shell, all of it wet and gleaming in the faint, diffuse light. A large flat stone serves as a step at the water's edge, its surface worn smooth by countless feet over countless years, and beside it stands the rope post, a stout wooden pillar driven deep into the bank, its top weathered to a silvery grey and its sides dark with moisture. The post leans slightly towards the river, not from weakness, but from the steady, patient pull of the ferry rope over the seasons, a lean that gives it a look of quiet, enduring service. Beyond the landing the path begins, a narrow track of packed earth that leads up through the reeds and willows and then climbs the gentle slope towards the far village, disappearing into the mist that still lingers among the trees. You guide the boat towards the landing with the last few strokes of the pole, the movements now so gentle that they barely disturb the water, and the flat bottom of the boat hisses softly as it touches the gravel. The boat settles with a small, gentle lurch, and the sound of the gravel shifting under the hull is a grounding, familiar noise that tells you the crossing is complete. You step out into the cold water, feeling it seep through the seams of your boots and chill your feet, and you take hold of the bow rope, its hemp fibers rough and wet in your grip. With a slow, steady pull, you draw the boat a little further up onto the shingle so that it rests securely, and then you loop the rope around the post in a few quick, practiced turns, the knot catching on itself and holding firm. The boat is now secure, its bow pointing back towards the river, its lantern still burning steadily at the bow post, a small golden beacon in the grey. You stand for a moment with one hand resting on the post, looking back into the mist towards the river, and you can see nothing of the far bank you left behind, only the pale shifting curtain of fog that hides the water and the far hills and the waking village on the other side. The river is a broad, quiet presence. Its surface just visible in the near distance is a band of dark grey that merges with the lighter grey of the mist, and you listen to its soft, continuous murmur, a sound that has been your companion since you rose from your bed in the dark. There is no one waiting at the landing. The far village is still asleep, its houses hidden beyond the willows and the rising ground, and the path that leads up from the water is an empty ribbon of pale dirt disappearing into the mist. You can see the first few yards of it, lined with the dark shapes of shrubs and the occasional small tree, and then it fades into the grey, its destination invisible. The silence on this side of the river is just as deep as the silence you left, a quiet so complete that it seems to be a substance in itself, a soft, absorbent blanket that covers everything. You stand and listen, and after a moment you hear the distant crowing of roosters from the hidden village, their calls softened and blurred by the fog so that they seem to come from very far away, as if the village is not just over the hill, but miles off, in another valley entirely. The roosters are the first voices of the day on this side, and their crowing is followed by the faint barking of a dog, and then, even fainter, the lowing of a cow waiting to be milked. These are the sounds of a world slowly waking, and you receive them with a quiet satisfaction, knowing that soon the first travellers will appear on the path, and your work for the day will truly begin. You turn from the river and walk a few steps up the landing, your boots crunching softly on the wet gravel, and you find the flat stone that serves as a waiting seat, a broad, smooth slab that some long ago ferryman or village stonemason dragged into place and set firmly into the bank. The stone is cold through your wool cloak, but you settle onto it anyway, pulling your hood closer against the damp, and you let your hands rest on your knees, the fingers curled loosely, the palms still tingling slightly from the grip of the pole. You are in no hurry to do anything else. Waiting is a large part of a ferryman's life, and you have learned to wait with the same calm patience with which you pole across the river. The mist continues to shift and thin around you, and as you sit, the world very slowly begins to reveal more of itself. The willow trees on the bank become more distinct, their individual branches separating from the general mass, and the reeds at the water's edge show their pale golden color more clearly. The sky above the mist is lightening, and you can now see that the fog is no longer a solid ceiling, but a series of drifting layers, some thick and low, others thin and high, and through the thinner patches you catch the faintest hint of pale blue, a color that has not been visible all morning. The day is coming, and it is coming gently, without any suddenness or drama, just a slow, steady brightening that matches the slow, steady rhythm of your own breath. You take a piece of the hard bread from your pouch and break off a small corner, chewing it slowly while you watch the river. The bread is dense and slightly sour, made from rye flour and baked in the village oven 3 days ago, and it requires a long, patient chewing that gives you something to do while you wait. The taste is simple and wholesome, and you follow it with a sip of water from the small leather flask that hangs beside your pouch. The water cool and clean, drawn from the well behind your hut yesterday evening. The small meal is enough to settle the gentle hunger that has been with you since you rose, and you eat without hurry, savoring each bite, letting your gaze wander over the river and the mist and the emerging shapes of the far bank, which is now just beginning to show as a faint, dark line through the thinning fog. The mist continues to lift, and as it does, the river reveals its full breadth for the first time this morning. You can now see the dark, moving band of the central channel, the pale, rippling shallows near both banks, and the flat, grey expanse of the water stretching away upstream and downstream, its surface touched here and there by the faint silver light of the hidden sun. The far bank is a low, dark silhouette of trees and reeds, still half shrouded, but now clearly a solid shore, and you can even make out the small shape of your own hut, a tiny dark square perched on the gentle slope above the water, its thatch roof pale against the darker green of the hedge behind it. Seeing your hut from this side gives you a quiet sense of connection, a reminder that the river is not a barrier but a link, a road of water that joins the two villages rather than separating them, and you are the keeper of that road, the quiet facilitator of all the small crossings that make up the life of this valley. The air is still cool, but the mist has left a fine layer of moisture on everything, and the gravel of the landing glistens with it, and the willow leaves are beaded with droplets that catch the growing light and glitter like tiny cold jewels. The birds are waking fully now, and their calls are no longer tentative but full-throated and varied, a chorus of chirps and trills, and the occasional clear liquid note of a blackbird somewhere in the willows. The sounds weave together into a gentle, cheerful tapestry that fills the air without being loud, and you listen to it with a quiet appreciation, letting it wash over you, without needing to identify each individual singer. The mist still lingers in the hollows and along the water's surface in thin, trailing wisps, but the main body of the fog has risen and is now a low grey cloud that sits just above the treetops, its underside glowing faintly with the light of the sun that is still just below the horizon. The day is on the threshold, and you are sitting on that threshold with the patience of someone who has seen this moment thousands of times and yet finds it fresh each morning. You stand after a while, not because you are restless, but because your body feels like moving, and you walk slowly along the edge of the landing, checking the boat's position and making sure the rope is still secure. The boat rests easily on the gravel, its flat bottom firmly grounded, and the lantern still burns at the bow, its flame now pale and small against the brightening air. You consider blowing it out, but decide to leave it a little longer, a courtesy to any traveller who might be watching from the far bank and using the light to gauge your position. You walk back to the stone and sit again, settling into the same comfortable posture, your hands resting on your knees, your eyes on the river. The waiting is not empty. It is full of the small, quiet details of the morning, the movement of the water, the calls of the birds, the gradual warming of the air as the sun finally clears the hills and sends its first long rays slanting through the mist. You feel a deep, quiet contentment, a sense of being exactly where you should be, doing exactly what you should be doing, and you let the peace of the far shore settle over you like the last, lingering strands of the morning fog. Waiting is a large part of a ferryman's life, and it is a skill that you have cultivated over the years as carefully as you have cultivated the stroke of the pole or the reading of the current. It is not an empty waiting, not the restless clock-watching waiting of a traveller delayed on a journey. It is a full, quiet, patient waiting that has its own texture and rhythm, its own small pleasures and subtle variations. You settle onto the flat stone at the edge of the landing. the same stone that has served ferrymen as a seat for generations. Its surface warms smooth by the weight of countless waiting bodies, and you let your weight sink into it, feeling the cold of the rock through your wool cloak, and the solid, unmoving presence of it beneath you. The stone is a pale grey, flecked with tiny crystals that glint faintly in the growing light, and its edges are rounded and soft, shaped by rain and frost and the patient abrasion of the river in flood. You know this stone as well as you know your own bed, and settling onto it feels like coming home to a small, familiar station, a place of rest between crossings. You pull your hood closer against the damp, though the mist is thinning now and the air is slowly warming, and you tuck your hands into your sleeves, crossing your arms loosely over your chest. The posture is comfortable and conserving of warmth, one you have adopted 1,000 times on 1,000 mornings, just like this one, and your body settles into it without thought. Your breathing slows and deepens, matching the quiet rhythm of the river, and your gaze softens, not focusing on any one thing, but taking in the whole scene before you, the pale gravel of the landing, the dark water lapping gently against the shingle, the reeds nodding their feathered heads, the willow branches trailing in the current, the mist lifting in slow fraying sheets from the surface of the river. The world is a painting in shades of grey and green and pale gold, and you are a quiet figure in the corner of it, still and watchful, asking nothing of the morning but to be allowed to sit in it. The mist continues to shift and thin as you wait, and the changes are so gradual that you do not notice them happening, only that the world is slightly different each time you look up. A few minutes ago the far bank was invisible. Now it is a faint dark line of trees half seen through the drifting fog, a suggestion of solidity rather than a certainty. The river's surface is becoming more visible too, its dark, moving water reflecting the pale grey of the sky in long, smooth streaks that are broken only by the occasional ripple from a floating twig or a rising fish. You watch the water with the calm, detached attention of someone who has spent a lifetime looking at rivers, and you notice the small things that a hurried eye would miss. The way the current curls around the willow roots in slow, lazy spirals, the way the light catches the underside of a floating leaf and turns it momentarily silver, the way a water beetle skates across a still patch near the bank, its legs dimpling the surface without breaking it. These small sights are a quiet entertainment, a slow, gentle parade of tiny events that fill the waiting time with a peaceful interest. The sounds of the morning are growing too, layering one upon another, like the notes of a piece of music that is being composed in real time. The river's murmur is the constant bass note, a low, liquid sound that never stops, and above it, the birds are beginning their full chorus. You can hear the clear, flute-like call of a blackbird from somewhere in the willows, a sound that seems to pierce the mist without disturbing it, and the answering chatter of sparrows in the reeds, a busy, cheerful noise that speaks of nests and territories, and the small, urgent business of bird life. A wood pigeon coos from the trees beyond the landing, its call a soft, rhythmic repetition of 5 notes that rises and falls in a gentle, drowsy pattern, and somewhere far off, a cuckoo calls, its 2-note song clear and sad, and somehow ancient, a sound that has been heard on these banks since long before there were ferrymen or villages or anyone to listen. The birds do not hurry, their music is leisurely and unhurried, a slow celebration of the morning that matches your own quiet mood, and you listen to it with the same soft attention you give to the river, not analyzing or naming, but simply receiving. Your mind wanders as you sit, drifting through calm, simple things that rise up from the quiet of your thoughts, like bubbles from the riverbed. You think about the pattern of the planks on your boat, the way the grain of the oak swirls in a particular knot near the bow, a knot that you have looked at so many times it has become a kind of friend, a familiar face in the wood. You think about the bread in your pouch, the dense, sour taste of it, and you consider eating another piece but decide to wait a little longer, savoring the anticipation. You think about the pole resting now in the boat, its ash shaft still wet from the crossing, and you picture the warm patches where your hands grip it, the two smooth, slightly darker areas that have been shaped by your palms over the years, a record of your work written in wood. You think about the fire in your hut, now burned down to glowing embers, and the way the warmth will feel when you return to add a new log, the sudden bloom of heat on your face and hands. These thoughts are not connected in any logical way. They simply appear and pass, one giving way to the next like the slow drift of clouds across a summer sky, and you watch them with the same detached calm with which you watch the river, not clinging to any of them, not pushing any of them away. The stillness of the waiting is not an absence of movement. It is a different kind of movement, a slow internal movement that has its own gentle momentum. Your body is still, but your senses are alive, taking in the cool, damp air, the scent of wet stone and water weeds, the faint, sweet fragrance of the willow leaves, the taste of the river on your lips when you lick them. Your eyes move slowly across the scene, resting for a while on a particular detail. A dragonfly that has landed on a reed stem, its wings a blur of iridescent blue, its body a slender dark needle, and then moving on to the next detail, the way the mist is now lifting from the far bank in a single, solid sheet that rises like a curtain being slowly raised. The dragonfly darts away, its flight a rapid zigzagging path that takes it out over the water and then back to the reeds, and you follow it with your eyes for a moment before letting it go. Everything in the morning is in motion, but the motion is slow and fluid, a dance rather than a race, and your waiting is a part of that dance, a still point around which the world gently turns. You become aware of the sun before you see it, a warmth that begins as a faint golden pressure on the left side of your face, the side that faces east, where the hills rise beyond the far village. The warmth is subtle at first, barely more than a suggestion, but it grows steadily, spreading across your cheek and forehead, and you turn your face towards it with a slow, instinctive movement, closing your eyes for a moment to feel it more fully. The light through your closed lids is a warm, rosy orange, the color of a candle flame seen through a thin cloth, and it fills your vision with a gentle, glowing softness. When you open your eyes again, you see that the sun has cleared the hilltops and is now shining through a thin patch in the mist, its rays slanting down to the river in long, golden shafts that catch the remaining fog and turn it into a luminous, shimmering veil. The light touches the water and turns it from dark grey to a deep olive brown, and it touches the willow leaves and turns them from grey-green to a bright, living green, and it touches the gravel of the landing and makes it glitter with 1,000 tiny points of reflected light, as if the stones are studded with minute diamonds. The transformation is quiet and total, and you watch it with a quiet, total appreciation, a sense of gratitude that is too deep for words. The mist is now mostly gone, reduced to a few thin, trailing wisps that cling to the hollows of the banks and drift lazily over the water's surface, and the river lies revealed in its full, calm beauty. It is a broad, gentle river, not wide enough to be imposing, but wide enough to be a real presence, a living, moving body of water that has carved this valley over millennia, and will continue to carve it long after everyone you know is gone. Its surface is a sheet of hammered silver now, ruffled by the light morning breeze that has just begun to stir, a breeze that barely moves the air, but is enough to create a delicate pattern of ripples that catch the sunlight and scatter it in 1,000 directions. The reeds on both banks sway gently with the breeze, their stems bending and straightening in a slow, synchronized wave, and the willow branches lift and fall with a soft, rustling sigh. The far bank is now perfectly clear, a dark green line of trees and bushes that mirrors the near bank, and you can see your hut quite plainly, a small square shape with a thatched roof and the thin trail of smoke rising from the chimney hole, the smoke a pale grey against the blue of the sky. The sight of your hut, so small and distant, fills you with a quiet sense of homeliness, a reminder that your own fire is still burning, your own bed still waiting, your own small life still going on in its quiet, steady way. You shift on the stone, adjusting your position slightly to stay comfortable, and you feel the pleasant ache of stillness in your muscles, the slight stiffness that comes from sitting in one place for a long time. You stretch your legs out in front of you, crossing them at the ankles, and you roll your shoulders slowly, feeling the bones pop and settle. Your body is rested from the sitting, but it is also ready to move when the time comes, and you know that the time will come soon. The sun is fully up now, and the village on the far side will be stirring, the farmers and their wives and children rising from their beds, lighting their fires, preparing for the day. Soon someone will need to cross, either to this side or from this side back to the other, and you will rise from the stone and push the boat out and take up the pole again, and the quiet stillness of the waiting will give way to the quiet motion of the ferrying. But for now, in this last golden moment of stillness, you are content to remain exactly where you are, a ferryman at rest, watching the river and the sky and the slow, beautiful unfolding of the morning. You hear a sound on the path behind you, a soft, rhythmic crunching of footsteps on packed earth, and you turn your head slowly, without hurry, to look. A figure is coming down the path from the village, wrapped in a dark cloak, walking with the heavy, deliberate tread of someone who has just woken and is not yet fully alert. The figure is still some distance away, a small, dark shape against the green of the hedgerows, but it is moving steadily towards the landing, and you know that your waiting is nearly over. You do not rise immediately. You sit for a moment longer, watching the traveller approach, and you feel a quiet sense of readiness settling over you, a gentle transition from stillness to motion that is as smooth and natural as the river itself. The stone is cold beneath you, the sun is warm on your face, the river is murmuring its endless song, and the day is beginning its slow, quiet work, a work that you will carry forward, one crossing at a time, until the sun sets and the mist returns and the world falls once more into the deep, peaceful silence of the night. The traveller comes down the path with the slow, heavy tread of someone still half caught in sleep, their footsteps a soft, rhythmic crunch on the packed earth that grows steadily louder as they approach the landing. You remain seated on the flat stone for a moment longer, watching the figure take shape through the thinning mist, and you feel no need to rise before you are needed, because the ferryman's time is measured not by the urgency of others, but by the steady, patient rhythm of the river. The figure is wrapped in a dark wool cloak, the hood pulled forward so that you cannot yet see the face, and they carry a small bundle slung over one shoulder, a sack or a pack of some kind, its weight causing them to lean slightly to one side as they walk. A farmer, perhaps, or a tinker, or a messenger travelling between the two villages, someone with a small errand that has drawn them from their bed before the sun has fully cleared the hills. Their breath mists in the cold air, small white puffs that appear and dissolve with each step, and they walk with the careful, unsteady gait of a person navigating a familiar path while still blinking the sleep from their eyes. You know this gait. You have seen it 100 times in 100 different travellers, and it speaks of the universal reluctance of the human body to leave its warm bed on a damp morning. As the traveller draws closer, you rise slowly from the stone, uncurling your legs and standing with the easy, unhurried motion of someone who has been still for a while and feels no need to rush the transition. Your muscles are slightly stiff from the sitting, and you stretch your arms once, a slow cat-like extension that pulls the cool morning air deep into your lungs before letting them fall back to your sides. You turn towards the boat and check the rope one more time, though you know it is secure, and you see that the lantern is still burning at the bow, its flame now pale and almost invisible in the growing daylight. The traveller stops at the edge of the landing, a few feet from where you stand, and pushes back their hood to reveal a face you recognize. It is the miller's son from the far village, a young man with a quiet manner and hands permanently dusted with fine, pale flour. He nods to you in greeting, a small silent dip of the chin, and you return the nod with the same wordless economy, because there is no need for speech between people who understand the quiet of the early morning. He steps down onto the gravel and waits while you untie the rope from the post, his bundle now resting at his feet, his eyes on the river with the unfocused gaze of someone whose thoughts are still back in his warm kitchen. You pull the boat a little further into the water, the gravel hissing and crunching beneath the flat hull, and you hold it steady with one hand on the gunwale while the miller's son steps aboard. He does so with the practiced ease of someone who has crossed this river many times, placing one foot on the center of the rear bench and then stepping down into the boat without rocking it, his weight settling with a soft, solid thump. He sits on the crossbench, his bundle on his lap, and folds his hands over it, his shoulders slightly hunched against the cold. You push the boat free of the shingle, feeling the familiar resistance of the gravel, and then you climb aboard yourself at the stern, the boat dipping and swaying with your weight before settling into a steady, level float. You take up the pole from where it rests along the center of the boat, its ash shaft still wet and cool from the first crossing, and you turn the boat so that the bow points back towards the near bank, now visible as a dark line of reeds and willows in the distance, with your own hut, a tiny pale square on the slope beyond. The lantern swings gently on its post, its flame dancing once and then steadying, and you are ready for the return crossing. The miller's son says nothing, and you say nothing in return. The silence between you is not awkward or cold. It is the comfortable silence of two people who share an understanding of the morning, a mutual respect for the peace of the river and the mist, and the slow, quiet work of the day. You push away from the far bank with a gentle stroke of the pole, the iron tip sinking into the soft mud and propelling the boat forward with a low, liquid gurgle, and the landing behind you begins to recede, its gravel and willows and the flat stone all fading slowly into the mist that still lingers in patches along the shore. The mist is much thinner now than it was an hour ago, but it still clings to the water surface in places, drifting in slow, lazy ribbons that part around the bow and close again behind the stern, and the air is still cool and damp, though the sun is now fully above the hills and its light filters down through the remaining fog in pale golden shafts. The river is a broad, dark sheet of moving water, its surface ruffled by the light breeze that has just begun to stir, and the reflection of the sky is a pale, milky blue that breaks into 1,000 shimmering fragments whenever a ripple passes. You settle into the rhythm of the pole, the same slow, patient rhythm that you have maintained all morning, and the presence of the passenger does not change the essential nature of the work. The pole sinks, the boat glides, the water drips, and the gentle music of the crossing plays on, as it always does. The only difference is a slight adjustment in the weight of the boat, a deeper settling into the water that you feel through the soles of your boots, a subtle heaviness that requires a fraction more effort on each push, a slightly deeper lean into the pole. The miller's son is not a large man, but his weight, combined with his bundle, changes the boat's trim enough that you must compensate with small instinctive shifts of your stance and grip. You move your feet a few inches wider apart on the wet planks, and you choke up slightly on the pole, holding it a hand's breadth lower to gain a better angle against the deeper draft. And these adjustments happen without thought, your body responding to the changed conditions as naturally as a tree bends to a steady wind. The miller's son sits quietly on the crossbench, his gaze fixed on the water ahead, or perhaps on nothing at all, and you are aware of his presence as a calm, silent weight, a companion who asks nothing but the simple service of the crossing. He is still heavy with sleep. You can see it in the slackness of his shoulders and the slow, infrequent blinking of his eyes, and you suspect that he will doze before you reach the other side, lulled by the gentle rocking of the boat and the soft, repetitive sounds of the pole. You have ferried many dozing passengers over the years, and you have learned to recognize the signs, the gradual drooping of the head, the slow, deep breathing, the occasional startle as the boat lurches slightly and the sleeper jerks awake for a moment before sinking back into the doze. It is a quiet compliment to your skill, this trust that the boat will carry them safely across without their vigilance, and you accept it with the same quiet satisfaction you feel when a bird settles on the gunwale and rides with you for a while before flying off. The crossing is much the same as the outward one, the same slow, steady poling, the same soft gurgle of the water, the same creak of the timbers and drip of the pole, and yet it is also different, because the light has changed, and the mist has lifted, and the world is no longer a small, private circle of lantern glow, but a broad, open expanse of river and sky and green banks. You can see the near bank clearly now, its reeds and willows distinct and detailed, their leaves glistening with the last of the dew, and you can see the path that leads up to your hut, a pale, winding ribbon of earth that disappears into the hedge. The smoke from your chimney is a thin grey column rising straight up into the still air, and the sight of it is a small homely comfort that you carry with you across the water. The far bank behind you is also clear, its landing and the flat stone and the path up to the village all visible, and you can even see a second figure on the path now, another early riser making their way down to wait for the ferry. You note this with a quiet peripheral awareness, filing it away for the next crossing, but you do not let it distract you from the present task. The river requires your full attention, and the miller's son deserves a smooth, uneventful passage. The pole finds the bottom at the usual depths, the familiar sequence of mud and clay and gravel that maps the riverbed, and you navigate by the feel of it, your hands reading the underwater landscape as easily as your eyes read the visible one. The current is slightly stronger now, perhaps because the morning breeze is pushing the surface water downstream, and you lean into the pole with a little more weight to compensate, your shoulders and back working in a steady, rhythmic effort that warms you against the lingering chill of the air. The miller's son sways gently with the boat's motion, his body loose and relaxed, and after a few minutes his head does indeed begin to droop, his chin sinking slowly towards his chest, and then jerking up again in a brief reflexive correction. You watch this with a soft, inward smile, a small private amusement that does not reach your face, and you continue poling with the same steady, unhurried strokes, careful not to make any sudden movements that might startle him fully awake. Halfway across the river, you notice that the lantern's light is no longer needed. The sun is now bright enough that the flame is barely visible, a pale, transparent ghost of gold that flickers uselessly against the daylight, and you decide to blow it out. You pause in your poling for a moment, letting the pole trail in the water behind the boat to act as a rudder, and you reach forward to the lantern post. The little door opens with a soft click, and you lean close and blow a single, gentle breath across the wick, extinguishing the flame with a thin, curling trail of smoke that rises and mingles with the remaining mist. The glass is hot to the touch, and you close the door carefully, latching the hook, and then you resume your poling, the boat gliding forward again, without the small golden companion that has been with you since the first crossing. The absence of the lantern feels like a small, quiet transition, a marker that the deep night is truly over, and the full day has begun, and you accept it with the same calm acceptance with which you accept all the small changes of the morning. The miller's son stirs at the small sound of the lantern door closing, his head lifting and his eyes opening briefly, but he sees only the river and the sky and the familiar figure of the ferryman at the stern, and he closes his eyes again almost immediately, sinking back into his doze with a soft exhaled breath. You continue poling, and the near bank grows steadily closer, its details becoming sharper and more familiar with each stroke, the particular bend of the largest willow, the patch of pale mud where the cattle come down to drink, the wooden post of your own landing, dark and weathered, with the rope coiled neatly beside it. The boat moves through the water with a smooth, steady progress, and you feel the quiet satisfaction of a task nearing its completion, a satisfaction that is not loud or triumphant, but calm and deep, like the slow settling of sediment in a still pool. As you approach the shallows on the near side, the riverbed rises to meet the pole, and you adjust your strokes accordingly, making them shorter and gentler, using the pole more to steer than to push. The water becomes so clear that you can see the pebbles on the bottom, their colors muted browns and grays, and the occasional flash of white quartz, and you can see the shadow of the boat sliding over them, a dark rippling shape that moves like a slow underwater bird. The boat hisses softly as it touches the gravel, and you step out into the cold water to pull it up onto the shingle, the familiar chill seeping through your boots and waking your feet fully. The miller's son stirs at the slight jolt of the grounding, and he opens his eyes fully this time, blinking in the brightening light, and he stands slowly, careful not to rock the boat, his bundle in his hand. He steps out onto the shingle, his boots crunching on the wet stones, and he turns to you and nods once more, A silent, grateful gesture that is all the payment you need for this crossing, though he will likely leave a small coin or a loaf at your door later in the day, as is the custom. You nod back, and he turns and walks up the path towards the village, his figure growing smaller and darker against the green until he disappears into the hedge. You stand for a moment beside the boat, watching him go, and then you turn your attention back to the river and the far bank, where the second traveller is now waiting at the landing, a small patient figure outlined against the pale gravel. The sun is fully up, the mist is almost entirely gone, and the river lies calm and shining under the blue sky, a broad, beautiful road of water that you will cross again and again throughout the day, carrying travellers from one side to the other in a slow, steady rhythm that never changes and never grows old. You pull the boat a little higher onto the shingle, coil the rope neatly beside the post, and settle onto the flat stone to wait for the next passenger, your hands resting loosely on your knees, your face turned towards the sun, and your heart as calm and quiet as the river itself. With the miller's son gone up the path towards the waking village, his dark cloak swallowed by the hedge, and his footsteps fading into the general quiet of the morning, you find yourself alone once more at the landing. The flatboat rests on the shingle, its hull still wet from the last crossing, and the rope lies coiled beside the post in a neat, damp spiral. The sun is now fully clear of the hills, its light falling across the river in a broad golden sheet that turns the water from dark grey to a deep shimmering olive, and the mist has retreated to a few thin trailing ribbons that cling to the hollows of the banks and drift lazily over the surface like the last reluctant remnants of a dream. You stand for a moment with your hands resting on the gunwale, feeling the warmth of the sun on the back of your neck and the cool damp air still rising from the river, and you decide, without any particular urgency, to push out once more onto the water, not to carry a passenger but simply to tend the ferry's position and let the morning settle fully around you. There is a figure on the far path you noticed earlier, a second traveller making their slow way down to the landing, but they are still some distance off, a small dark speck moving through the green, and there is time enough to drift for a while in the centre of the river and watch the last of the mist burn away. You push the boat free of the shingle with a steady, unhurried motion, the gravel crunching and hissing beneath the flat hull, and you guide it out into the shallows until it floats. The water is cold around your boots as you wade, but the cold is no longer the deep, penetrating chill of pre-dawn. It is a fresher, livelier cold, tinged with the promise of the warming day. You climb aboard at the stern and take up the pole, its ash shaft now dry in the places where your hands grip it, but still damp at the lower end, and you push off from the bank with a single, gentle stroke that sends the boat gliding out towards the deeper channel. The lantern at the bow is dark now, its flame extinguished, and the glass panes are beginning to warm in the sun, their condensation slowly evaporating in faint, misty curls. You pole with a slow, leisurely rhythm, not aiming for the far bank, but angling the boat slightly upstream so that it will drift back down to the landing on its own when you are ready, and within a few minutes you have reached the broad, open centre of the river, where the current is strong but smooth and the water stretches away on all sides in a vast, glittering plain. You let the pole trail in the water behind the boat, its iron tip just brushing the bottom, and you allow the boat to slow and then stop, held in place by the gentle pressure of the current against the shaft. The boat rocks softly, a slow liquid motion that is almost imperceptible, and you stand with your weight on one leg and your hands resting lightly on the top of the pole, your face turned towards the east. The sun is climbing steadily now, a pale gold disk that is still soft enough to look at without squinting, and its light pours down through the last thin veils of mist in long slanting rays that seem to make the air itself visible, each ray a column of floating golden dust. The mist is turning gold at its upper edges, a brilliant, luminous gold that fades to soft grey and then to nothing, and it rises in slow, fraying sheets from the surface of the river, curling and uncurling as if the water is breathing out the last of the night. You watch the transformation with the same quiet, patient attention you have given to everything this morning, and you feel a deep, wordless satisfaction of the beauty of it, a beauty that asks nothing of you but that you be present to witness it. The river's surface is no longer the dark, featureless mirror it was an hour ago. It is a living, moving tapestry of color and light, constantly changing and yet always the same. The breeze, which has been slowly strengthening since the sun rose, ruffles the water into a delicate pattern of ripples that catch the sunlight and scatter it in 1,000 directions, so that the river seems to be covered in a shifting net of gold and silver threads. Where the water is still, near the banks and in the lee of the boat, it reflects the pale blue of the sky and the soft, warm orange of the sun, the colors blending and separating and blending again in a slow, mesmerizing dance. The water is so clear now that you can see the riverbed in the shallower parts, the sand and gravel, and the occasional smooth dark stone, all of them wavering slightly as the light bends through the moving surface, and you can see the shadow of your boat on the bottom, a dark, rippling shape that glides along like a silent, underwater companion. Small fish dart beneath the boat, their silver sides flashing as they turn, and the water beetle rows itself across a still patch near the bank, its legs leaving tiny circular dimples that spread and fade. The reeds on both banks are now fully visible, no longer dark, indistinct masses, but individual stems of pale gold and green, their feathered heads nodding gently in the breeze. They sway in a slow, synchronized wave that travels along the water's edge, a motion so smooth and continuous that it seems almost like the breathing of the land itself, a quiet, vegetative respiration that matches the rhythm of the river and the breeze and your own slow, steady heart. Behind the reeds, the willows stand in their ancient, leaning postures, their long branches trailing in the water and their leaves shivering in the breeze with a soft, silvery rustle that blends with the sound of the river and the calls of the birds. The willows are no longer grey and ghostly. They are a vivid, living green, each leaf distinct and sharp-edged in the clear morning light, and the droplets of dew that still cling to them sparkle like tiny scattered crystals. The banks are alive with colour now, the dark, rich brown of the mud, the pale straw of the reeds, the bright green of the willows, and the darker, bluer green of the hedgerows beyond, all of it framed by the pale, clean blue of the sky, in which a few high, thin clouds are beginning to appear, their edges tinged with gold from the rising sun. The calls of birds are everywhere, no longer tentative or isolated, but full-throated and confident, a rich, layered chorus that fills the air without overwhelming it. A blackbird sings from the top of a willow, its clear, flute-like notes falling in a cascade of liquid melody that seems to hang in the air for a moment before dissolving into the general hum of the morning. Sparrows chatter busily in the reeds, their quick, sharp calls overlapping in a cheerful, chaotic rhythm, and a thrush repeats its three-note phrase from somewhere in the hedge, insistent and sweet. High overhead, a pair of swallows have appeared, the first you have seen this spring, and they wheel and dive over the water with a speed and grace that makes the rest of the world seem slow by comparison, their forked tails cutting the air like tiny feathered scissors. Their presence is a quiet confirmation that the season is truly turning, that the long cold months are behind and the warm days are coming, and you watch them for a while with a soft, unthinking pleasure, the pole steady in your hands and the boat rocking gently beneath you. Somewhere on the far bank, a dog barks lazily, its voice carrying clearly across the water now that the mist has lifted, a single, deep note that speaks of a familiar routine. A sheepdog roused from its bed and beginning its morning patrol. You feel the sun touch your face fully for the first time, its warmth cutting gently through the last of the damp and spreading across your cheeks and forehead and the bridge of your nose. The sensation is so pleasant that you close your eyes for a moment, letting the warmth soak into your skin, and you feel the slight tension in your shoulders and neck, a tension you had not even noticed, begin to ease and dissolve. The insides of your eyelids glow a warm rosy orange, and you stand there motionless and at peace as the boat drifts slowly in the current and the river murmurs its endless soothing song. When you open your eyes again, the world seems somehow brighter and sharper, as if the sun has washed away a faint invisible film that had been covering everything, and you take a deep breath of the clean, cool air, tasting the green scent of the willows and the faint, peaty tang of the river water, and you let the breath out in a long, slow sigh that is not tired but content. You decide to use this quiet time in the center of the river to attend to a few small tasks that need doing, the kind of gentle, undemanding chores that fill a ferryman's day in the spaces between passengers. You draw the pole in from the water and lay it along the center of the boat, its wet length gleaming in the sun, and you bend down to check the coil of rope at the bow, making sure it is neatly stowed and free of tangles. The rope is damp and cool to the touch, and as you coil it anew, you run it through your hands, feeling the rough, familiar texture of the hemp fibers and checking for any frayed or weakened strands. You find none, and you set the coil back in its place under the bow bench, where it will be ready for the next landing. Next, you take the wooden scoop from its hook on the gunwale, a simple carved bowl of beechwood with a short handle, worn smooth by years of use, and you bail the small amount of water that has collected in the bilge since the last heavy rain. The water is clear and cool, and you pour it over the side in a slow, steady stream, watching it fall back into the river and merge with the larger flow, the droplets catching the sunlight and turning to brief, falling diamonds. The boat is now dry and tidy, and you replace the scoop on its hook and straighten up, feeling a quiet satisfaction in the order of things. You check the pole next, not because you think it needs checking, but because the habit is ingrained in you, a small ritual that has become part of the rhythm of the day. You run your hand along its length, feeling for any new splinters or cracks, and you find only the familiar smoothness, the two worn patches where your palms rest, the slight, dark staining near the iron tip where the river has left its mark. The iron tip itself is firmly attached, the pin secure, the metal dark with rust but still sound, and you nod to yourself, a tiny private gesture of approval, before laying the pole back in its place. You check the lantern too, though you will not need it again until evening, making sure the wick is trimmed and the oil reservoir is full. And you polish the glass panes with the hem of your sleeve until they are clear and bright, the crack in the one pane catching the light, but not spreading. These tasks are small and simple, and they occupy your hands while your mind drifts, a gentle, undemanding occupation that leaves you feeling calm and settled, as if you have put a small piece of the world in order. The breeze has freshened slightly, and it carries now the faint, sweet scent of hay from the meadows beyond the village, a smell that speaks of summer and long, warm afternoons. The mist is entirely gone, even the thin wisps that clung to the hollows have vanished, and the sky is a clear, pale blue that arches over the valley like a vast inverted bowl. The river stretches away upstream and downstream in a broad shining ribbon, its surface ruffled by the breeze into a million tiny wavelets that glitter and dance, and the hills on either side are a patchwork of green fields and darker woods, with the occasional pale scar of a chalk pit or the red-brown smudge of a ploughed field. The world is fully awake now, and the peace of the early mist has given way to a different kind of peace. A brighter, livelier peace that is filled with bird song and breeze and the gentle, productive hum of the day beginning. And yet the peace of the mist still clings to you, a quiet inward stillness that the sun and the breeze have not dispelled, and you carry it with you as you take up the pole once more and begin the slow, easy drift back towards the near bank. You do not pole with any urgency, just a few gentle strokes to guide the boat out of the main current and into the shallower water near the landing. The boat responds easily, as if it too is reluctant to hurry, and you let it glide the last few yards on its own momentum, the hull hissing softly as it slides over the gravel and comes to rest. You step out into the water, which is now merely cool rather than cold, and you pull the boat up onto the shingle and loop the rope around the post. The flat stone where you sat earlier is still there, waiting, and you settle onto it once more, your face turned towards the sun and your hands resting loosely on your knees. The morning has fully arrived, bright and clear and full of promise, and the river flows on, calm and unhurried, as it has always done and always will. You close your eyes for just a moment, feeling the sun on your lids, and you listen to the water, and the birds and the distant rhythmic sound of a woodcutter's axe from somewhere in the forest. A sound that is steady and reassuring, the sound of a world going about its quiet, ordinary business. And you, the ferryman, are a part of that business, a small steady presence on the river, ready for whatever the day brings, your heart as calm and clear as the morning sky. The last of the mist burns away as the sun clears the hilltops fully, and the river transforms into a broad, shimmering ribbon of hammered silver that stretches from horizon to horizon, its surface alive with the dance of a million tiny wavelets catching the morning light. The sky above is a pale, clean blue, the kind of blue that seems newly washed, and the few high clouds that drift across it are thin and white, their edges blowing gold as they pass before the sun. You stand beside the flatboat on the near landing, one hand resting on the weathered post, and you let your gaze travel slowly across the scene, the dark moving water of the main channel, the pale gravel of the shingle, the bright green of the reeds and willows on both banks, the distant patchwork of fields and woods on the hills, and your own small hut perched on the slope above, its thatch roof golden in the sun, and its chimney sending up a thin, steady thread of smoke. The world is fully awake now, and the quiet, private hush of the early morning has given way to the gentle, productive hum of the day. A hum made of birdsong and breeze, and the distant, rhythmic sounds of village life beginning. You feel a deep, quiet contentment settle over you, a sense that the morning has been well spent, and that the day ahead, though it will be full of small crossings and quiet waits, will be just as peaceful and steady as the hours that have already passed. You take a final look at the river, noting the strength of the current and the direction of the breeze, and then you turn and walk the few steps up the shingle to the flat stone where you have sat so many times this morning. The stone is warm now from the sun, no longer cold and damp, and you settle onto it with a slow, comfortable motion, stretching your legs out in front of you and crossing them at the ankles. The warmth of the stone seeps through your wool cloak and tunic, a gentle, pleasant heat that relaxes the muscles of your back and shoulders, and you tilt your face up to the sun with your eyes half closed, feeling the light press against your lids in a soft, rosy glow. You are in no hurry to do anything else. The first proper passengers of the day will come soon enough. Farmers and merchants and villagers with their baskets and tools and errands, and you will carry them across one by one or in small groups, poling back and forth with the same slow, steady rhythm you have maintained since you rose in the dark. But for now, there is only this moment of calm sunlight, and the sound of water chuckling around the stones at the edge of the landing, a sound that is as familiar to you as your own breathing, and just as constant. The pole rests across your knees, its ash shaft still wet and gleaming from the last crossing, and you run your fingers idly along its length, feeling the smooth, worn patches where your palms have polished the wood over the years. The iron tip glints dully in the sun, and a single droplet of water hangs from its edge, catching the light and holding it for a moment before falling onto the gravel with a tiny, silent splash. You think about the pole, the way it has been your companion through so many mornings like this one, the way it has never failed you or let you down, the way its weight and balance have become so familiar that it feels like an extension of your own arms. You think about the boat too, resting now on the shingle with its flat bottom grounded and its bow pointing out towards the river, its planks dark with moisture and its caulking still sound, and you feel a quiet, unspoken affection for these simple, sturdy things that make up your life. They ask so little of you, only your steady presence and your careful hands, and in return they give you the peaceful, satisfying work of the ferry, the slow crossing and the quiet waiting, and the gentle rhythm of the pole. The sounds of the village are growing now, drifting down the path from the cluster of houses hidden behind the hedge. You can hear the clatter of a bucket being filled at the well, the distant crow of a rooster still announcing the day to anyone who will listen, the lowing of a cow waiting to be milked, and the faint, high voice of a child calling to its mother. These sounds are not intrusive. They are the soft, familiar music of a small community going about its ordinary business, and you listen to them with the same detached, peaceful attention you have given to the river and the birds and the mist. The woodcutter you heard earlier is still at work somewhere in the forest on the hill, his axe striking a steady, rhythmic beat that echoes across the valley, a sound that speaks of patience and persistence and the slow, steady shaping of the world by human hands. A dog barks again, closer this time, and you see it emerge from the hedge at the top of the path. A lean, brown sheepdog that trots down to the landing with its tail wagging slowly, its nose working at the air. It knows you as all the village dogs know you, and it comes over to the flat stone and sniffs at your boots before settling down in the sun a few feet away, its chin on its paws and its eyes already closing. You reach down and scratch behind its ears for a moment, feeling the warm rough fur and the solid bone beneath, and the dog's tail thumps once against the gravel in quiet appreciation. The morning stretches ahead of you, full of small crossings and quiet waits, and you review the hours since you rose in the dark, not as a series of memories but as a single continuous sensation. A feeling that has no words but is made of darkness and candlelight and mist, and the weight of the pole and the silent traveller and the slow brightening of the world. You remember the hut, the deep stillness of the pre-dawn, the wool blanket still warm on the bed, the embers glowing under the ash, the candle flames steady on the window-sill. You remember the first walk down to the bank, the wet grass brushing against your boots, the flatboat waiting on the shingle, the rope looped around the post, the mist rising in thin ribbons from the dark water. You remember the first crossing, the world shrinking to the lantern, and the boat and the few feet of water around the hull, the pole finding the bottom in mud and clay and gravel, the mist folding around you like a soft grey cloak. You remember the far bank emerging, the reeds and willows taking shape in the thinning fog, the gravel landing with its flat stone and its rope post, the silence of the waiting, and the slow, patient passage of time. You remember the return crossing with the miller's son, the boat a little heavier and the current a little stronger, the lantern blown out halfway across as the sun finally broke through. And you remember the last peaceful drift in the center of the river, the mist burning away into gold, the birds beginning their full chorus, the world revealing itself in all its bright, calm beauty. These memories are not sharp or distinct, they are soft and blended, like the colors of the dawn sky, and they fill you with a quiet, wordless gratitude. Nothing dramatic has happened this morning, and that is exactly how it should be. The river has not flooded, the boat has not sprung a leak, no traveller has fallen in or lost their temper or demanded to be ferried faster than the river allows. The world has remained calm and orderly, moving at its own slow pace, and you have moved with it, a small steady part of the great quiet machinery of the valley. You think of the other ferrymen on other rivers, the ones who came before you and the ones who will come after, and you feel a connection to them that stretches across time, a shared understanding of the river and the mist and the slow, patient work of the pole. They sat on stones like this one, on banks like this one, and they watched the sun rise over the water just as you are watching it now, and they felt the same quiet peace that you feel, a peace that is not excitement or joy or even satisfaction, but something deeper and simpler, a peace that comes from being exactly where you should be, doing exactly what you should be doing, in harmony with the world around you. The dog at your feet stirs and lifts its head, its ears pricking forward, and a moment later you hear footsteps on the path behind you. You turn your head slowly, without hurry, and you see two figures coming down from the village, a man and a woman carrying baskets of goods to take to the market on the far side. They are talking quietly to each other, their voices too low to reach you, and they walk with the easy, familiar gait of people who have made this journey many times before. You rise from the stone, your muscles stretching pleasantly, and you pick up the pole from your knees and walk down to the boat. The dog remains on the gravel, its tail wagging slowly, its eyes following you with mild, sleepy interest. You pull the boat a little further into the water. the gravel crunching and hissing, and you hold it steady while the man and the woman step aboard, settling themselves on the crossbench with their baskets on their laps. They greet you with quiet, friendly words, and you return the greeting with a nod and a small, calm smile. Then you push off from the bank, the pole sinking into the water, and the boat glides forward into the sunlit river, the first of many crossings on this bright, peaceful morning. The sun climbs higher as you pole, and the warmth of it spreads across your shoulders and back, a gentle, pleasant heat that takes the last of the chill from your bones. The river flows on, calm and unhurried, its surface a dazzling sheet of light that shifts and sparkles with every ripple. The reeds sway on the banks, the willows trail their branches in the water, the birds sing their endless cheerful songs, and you, the ferryman, move steadily across the water with the pole in your hands and the quiet rhythm in your heart, a rhythm that will continue all day and into the evening, until the sun sets and the mist returns and the world falls once more into the deep, peaceful silence of the night. But that is a long way off, and for now there is only the sun and the river and the slow, steady work of the crossing, a work that is as old as the valley and as simple as breathing. A work that you will do again tomorrow and the day after and for all the days to come, as long as the river flows and the mist rises and there are travelers to carry from one bank to the other. And that is enough. That is more than enough. That is everything.